Well, next word is Gnostic.
Woo!
Clearly because you wrote for Gnosis.
You know, that is a fair question for that very reason.
Mm-hmm.
Well, firstly, we have to know what Gnosis is, because Gnostic comes from Gnosis. Gnosis means wisdom, knowledge. Agnosis, as an agnostic, means not knowing.
Okay.
So, Gnostic is a term that can mean a lot of different things depending on who you're talking to. You could say that anyone who isn't an agnostic claims to be a Gnostic because he thinks he knows something.
Okay.
And the truth of the matter is that that phrase is almost like Protestant, in the sense that it's used to cover so many things, it almost means nothing. But historically, it's a term that predates Christianity. The idea was that there was a knowledge, possession of which was necessary for salvation to the individual. But what precisely was that knowledge? And therein lies all the difference. There was, now there were pagan Gnostics predating Christianity. There were Christian Gnostics, Jewish Gnostics. What did they all claim? They all claimed that they had this knowledge which was necessary for salvation. But it varied depending upon whom you were speaking to. So you had one set, and we call those folks dualists. Not dualists as in fighting a duel, but dual as in two. Mm-hmm. And these dualists believed that there were two gods, equal strength in creation. The God of good and the God of evil. These are the dualists. The Zoroastrians here,
okay.
Believe this, the Manichaeans, people like that. Anyway. So the dualists then, some of them, not all, and unfortunately, unless I mention a specific group, everything I'm going to be saying about Gnosticism does not cover everyone who either call themselves or were called Gnostic.
Okay.
Just so you know. But dualists, as I say, believe in these two equal gods. Now, for many, but not all dualists, the good God created spirit, and the evil God matter.
Ah, I see.
Now, in this particular mythos, human souls were trapped by the evil god of matter and imprisoned in the bodies we went around in. And if this sounds a lot like Scientology, nothing is new under the sun. But, let's move along. Some of these took it a step further, and they made the creator of the Old Testament into an evil god, the so-called demiurge. Well, once they did that, you can imagine how they reversed everything. Because if the God of the Old Testament was really evil, then his opponent, Satan, the bringer of knowledge, remember in the garden? Mm-hmm. He was good. You see what happens when you go crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah. And from that came all sorts of groups, a few of which are still around today, like the Yazidis in Iraq, that the Muslims have so much fun oppressing and torturing now. No, I don't think Yazidis should be oppressed or tortured, but I'm mentioning that they do this. This idea, this dualism, came into the West through the Manichaeans. You've heard of the Cathars, yeah?
Yes.
They held this kind of dualism. And this is why they were so hated by both church and state. The Cathars, interestingly enough, took it a step further in that because matter is inherently evil, we're unable to control our appetites. But, big but, if you procreate, you would trap another human being in the flesh. So procreation is evil. Sex you can't help, but procreation is evil. And what happens from that? Anything becomes good. Any kind of sex is permissible, except that which leads to birth.
Wow.
Does that sound familiar too?
Sounds like the United States.
Yes, doesn't it just? But having said all of that, these people call themselves Gnostics. But there was another set, St. Clement of Alexandria. He called Gnostic anyone who held the true and Catholic faith, which he claimed was the saving knowledge which leads to salvation. And having said everything I've said, If you define Gnostic as St. Clement of Alexandria did, then I am a Gnostic. If you define it in any other way, I am not.
You're complicating things too much. Why can't we just say you do some things that vaguely resemble witchcraft, and then so you're Gnostic or occultist? You're complicating things too much, Charles. This is...
Ladies and gentlemen, if you find this stuff too complicated, my advice is ignore it. Don't study what you can't understand. And for heaven's sake, ladies and gentlemen, don't express opinions in areas that you don't catch. The problem is that if you do, you'll sound silly, and you may be actually complimenting someone. And then where would you be? But it is complex, and that's why people get so messed up on these things. They're very, very complex topics. They have a certain utility, but only if you're dealing with people who are also knowledgeable about them. Again, horses for courses, preparatio evangelium. There is no point exploring the Catholic elements in Greek mythology to Hindus. If you're going to start trying to convert Hindus, you really don't have to worry about whatever is left of the primeval revelation in Greek mythology.
Okay.
It's not really going to help. So if you don't deal with a great many occultists and Gnostics and perennialists, I guarantee you none of this stuff is going to do you much good, with one exception. And that one exception is if it leads you to accept that the sacraments and the faith are real the way this bookshelf is real. That is the one thing those people did understand, is that the unseen, the invisible, is quite as real. In some ways, almost more so than what we can see. Reality, ladies and gentlemen, is like an iceberg. What we see, what we can experience physically, is a small part of all there is. That is a truth and a reality that the modern world has lost sight of, and many Catholics have lost sight of. And if all of this gibbering that I've gone through about this stuff helps remind you of that, then it'll have served some purpose.